The most difficult part of colored pencils is to know how to blend them and layer them. In this video, we are going to learn 6 methods of that. I know there are so many videos like this out there, but this time I actually divided each method into 2, and I'm going to show you wax-based versus oil-based colored pencils. Are they layering the same, or are they blending the same with the same technique? We will see. If you want to check out the library of my fully narrated real-time tutorials, they are on my website ecegurular.com/Patreon. I have compared oil-based and wax-based colored pencils before. If you haven't seen it yet, it is right here for you. Also, this video might help you a lot too. And now, let's blend. Okay, here you see on the left the wax-based Caran d'Ache luminance, and on the right side you will see me painting with our oil-based polychromos. We will see if there are any differences between these pencils when we do this 6 different blending methods. The first method is layering. What do I mean by layering is that you do multiple layers of the same color or different colors until you get a smooth, uniform result. I have 2 different colors here, blue, dark blue, and light blue, like turquoise color, and as they came together, they are trying to blend, and in order to do that, I did multiple layerings of the 2 colors. The more layers you apply, much better, especially with colored pencils. But when you're applying your layers, don't forget to sharpen the pencil, because the sharper the pencil, the better you will get to the tooth of the paper and close all that white tooth showing. Another thing that you have to pay attention with blending naturally like this by layering is that you need to apply the same pressure throughout so that you kind of don't give any kind of pencil strokes and you keep the same amount of pigment on the paper throughout the layer. You shouldn't apply much pressure at all, because if you start pressuring, it's going to become burnishing instead of layering, and we don't want that at this point. So not much pressure, but not little pressure either, so you have to have a perfect balance in your pressure. After I finished the wax-based one, I started the oil-based one, and it was actually pretty good as well. The colors were really bright and they were layering smoothly, not as smooth as maybe Caran d'Ache because it's wax-based, but it was still really smooth. And maybe the oil-based ones need a little bit more layering than the wax-based one, but that's fine. Maybe 1 or 2 more layering, and then it looks beautiful anyway. Our second method is blending Stump. It is interesting because it doesn't work the same way that it works with charcoal pencils or graphite pencils, because you see the result right away when you blend with blending Stump once you draw with graphite pencils. But with colored pencils, it takes a while till those pigments get blended into each other. So what you do is you create the first layer with as much pigment as possible, and then you go in with your blending Stump and start blending, but very smoothly, very gently. Don't apply any pressure, because if you apply pressure, then you're going to you're gonna actually damage the tooth of the paper. We don't want that. We need more layering. So we do that, and then we do layering again with our colored pencil, and then we go in again with our blending Stump. We repeat this layer at least again 4 or 5 times, or until you get the result that you want. What I found interesting with blending Stump was actually this worked much better with the oil-based polychromos than Caran d'Ache. It's good to know. Now I'm gonna use more when I'm working with polychromos. Also, you will realize that wax-based pencils eat away much more easily than the oil-based ones. So I found myself sharpening my pencil a lot more when I was using wax-based Caran d'Ache. The third blending method is burnishing. Burnishing is interesting. So let me explain burnishing like this. You have multiple layers already you put in with your colored pencils, and then at the top you go with a pencil, maybe the same pencil or a lighter tone, and you start applying pressure a lot, and that pressure brings all these lower layers together and they blend in so smoothly most of the time. So if you did put enough amount of pigment on your paper already, then you're gonna have a great smooth result with no white of the paper showing. But if you were impatient and you didn't put enough layers yet, then after you burnish, it's not gonna look very nice, and it will be a little bit difficult to put more layer on top of it, because once you burnish, you actually damage the tooth. You still can, until some point, you can actually add more layers, but it's not going to be the same. So I highly recommend, before you burnish, you make sure that you put all the layers in that you want it. Even here, I feel like I should have put more layers, but oh well. You can burnish with the same colors. For example, the blue, dark blue, and the light blue, I could burnish by just applying more pressure, but here I wanted to show you a different technique. What I did is I applied layers of these beautiful blues, and on top of it, I went with white color. White colors or off-white colors are great in terms of going over all these layers and bringing them together. But you need to remember one thing, that once you use white or off-white or light gray, it's going to lighten it up. If you're using Caran d'Ache, I highly recommend buff titanium. Actually, you can buy buff titanium online as a single pencil as well. It's not very expensive. It is a great one for burnishing. Faber-Castell's white didn't do really bad either, but I think in terms of burnishing, I was surprised how polychromos performed that well with burnishing, because you know, I like burnishing with wax based pencil much more because they're smoother, but this one was actually really good. I liked it. Although I liked it, I feel like when I burnished with polychromos, there were still white of the tooth showing a little bit, but with the wax based Caran d'Ache, I didn't see that. What happens if you want to burnish but then you don't want to use white because you don't want it to lighten up, you want to keep your dark tones? Then you can actually burnish with a different color. Especially if you're working with skin tones, you can always go for maybe a tone of pink or orange or brown, which is much lighter than the, of course, the underneath layers. The whole point of burnishing is it needs to be at least 2 or 3 tones lighter than the layers below, but it doesn't have to be white. For this example, since I'm using blue, not a skin color, I'm going to use gray. Although I use the same color in both sets, one of them is much darker. Faber-Castell Polychromos had a darker gray tone for French gray, so you're gonna see that. But because of this, actually the right one is going to appear much darker and the left one is going to look like what I did with the white color, because they are very close in color. But what happens when you do it with a different color rather than white or off-white, it is going to add that color or pigment on the top. Why is this important? For example, let's say you did something in blue like me and then you want to go over it with yellow. You have to remember that blue and yellow makes green, so it's not going to be a lighter blue, but it's going to be green. So these kind of color combinations might change, so you have to be really careful about that. Besides that, I highly recommend you to try on a different paper first how this burnishing color would work out before you go into your own paper or own artwork and do it. And let's say you are working on a single face in a portrait, you can use a different burnishing color here and different burnishing color here. That's fine, as long as they just, you know, transition to each other very smoothly and nicely. It really doesn't matter what kind of burnishing pencil you're using in which part of the face. You don't have a rule of thumb that you're just going to use one single burnishing for the whole face, especially with shadows. If you want dark shadows like sepia color or burnt sienna, if you apply white over that, it's just going to look much lighter, and we don't want that. You can maybe apply burnt ochre 10% there, which is a mustardy yellow brown color. And the fifth one is burnishing with a colorless blender. So this colorless blender is interesting. It looks like a pencil, but it is not. I don't know what it is made of. Maybe you can share with me. This came with Karandash set for me, and this was the first time I was using it, but actually I was so happy with the result. How can I say? It's much better than blending Stump, but it is maybe, it's still kind of left a little bit of white of the paper for the oil-based Faber-Castell polychromos, but I think if you apply much more layers, in this case, it shouldn't create any differences. So full blender is great because you don't use any of your pencils in your pencil set, and pencils are expensive, and you can use it with anything, and you don't have to add a tone on top of the layers, or you don't have to lighten it up because you're not applying white. This is colorless, so you're just blending the colors you already have on your paper. It's amazing. I love this one. And finally, we are using a solvent. I have zested, but you can use many different brands. You can use Gamsol mineral spirits if you want to, and they're odorless, so that's great. Or you can use like some household products such as Vaseline or baby oil, which I will show you in a different video very soon. But if you have a blender like this, I highly recommend you to use it. Why do we use solvent when we are blending colored pencils, if you ask? Because it saves so much time if you're dealing with a larger area such as a background or clothing or even hair. Sometimes I have a lot of hair in my portraits that I need a base layer first, and blending with solvent helps a lot in terms of closing all those white of the paper. So one thing you have to remember with a solvent, to keep a tissue right next to you and clean the excess solvent on your brush on that tissue first before you apply on your paper, because there are disadvantages to solvents. They leave stains that look like oil stains and they don't go away. You cannot erase them, and once you actually color them over, it's not going to look the same. These type of color differences happen when you apply too much of a solvent. So I think balancing the amount of the solvent on your brush is super important, and it is something still I'm learning. And when you look at the back of your paper, you will see that those oil stains are there. One thing I want to tell you about the solvents is they might be toxic, so please keep the lid closed. Oh, by the way, I remembered, when you're working with the solvent, please make sure that you're working from lighter to darker area, because once you go from darker to lighter, then you're gonna carry all those dark pigments into your light area, which you don't want. That kind of looks dirty. So we finished all the methods that we know. What do you think? I really like the blending Stump result with the Faber-Castell polychromos, and I really like the burnishing method on our Karandash, which is wax-based pencil. And I really like the colorless blender pencil that I have. I'm gonna use it much more. I would love to hear your opinions, so please share in the comments, and I hope you find this video really helpful. In the end, we are looking at it, and there's not much difference between oil-based and wax-based maybe, but in overall I can say that we need to make as many layers as possible with both, and maybe a little bit more with the oil-based ones. But I find also blending Stump works miracles with oil-based Faber-Castell polychromos. So what do you think in general? Which one was the best option, do you think? And do you see any differences between oil-based and wax-based? Please share in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to visit my website and learn more about my real-time tutorials, the address is ecegurler.com/Patreon. I'll see you later. Bye. Thanks for watching my video. If you like my videos, please don't forget to subscribe. And for my real-time narrated tutorials, visit my Patreon, patreon.com/Ecegurler. Stay with art and love.